The scent of blood came first, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. Clara Blackburn forced her eyes open, the Texas sun blinding her momentarily, as consciousness returned with cruel clarity. The family wagon lay shattered around her, splintered wood jutting like bones from a broken body. At 14, Clara had imagined many horrors, but nothing like this crimson-soaked reality. She remained perfectly still, in the hidden compartment beneath the wagon floor, her father's precaution for traveling through dangerous territory. The false bottom had saved her life, but couldn't protect those she loved. Her fingertips traced the rough-hewn wood above her head, hesitating before pushing upward. To emerge meant facing what lay beyond. "Get up," she whispered to herself, throat parched and voice sounding foreign to her ears. "Papa would want you to get up." The world spun sickeningly as Clara extracted herself from the hidden space, her dress catching on jagged splinters. The smell hit her again, stronger now, blood baking into Texas dirt under the merciless sun. Her mother lay 10 paces away, crumpled like discarded calico, so the vibrant woman who had sung Clara to sleep just last night, now eerily still eyes, fixed on a heaven that hadn't intervened. Nearby, her father sprawled awkwardly, one hand still clutching the revolver he'd barely managed to draw. "No." Clara whispered the word inadequate against the crushing weight of reality. She crawled toward her mother, first memories flooding unbidden her mother's hands, guiding hers through embroidery just yesterday morning and the wildflowers they'd gathered together at their last camp. "Mama," she breathed, touching her mother's cooling cheek. "Please." But Mary Blackburn would never again brush her daughter's hair or scold her for wandering too far from camp. Clara felt something fracture inside her chest, not a clean break, but a splintering like the wagon around her. She turned to her father, tears blurring her vision. John Blackburn's weathered face was frozen in a final expression of defiance. Clara remembered their conversation just 3 nights ago, sitting beneath stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. "The West demands strength, Clara," he'd said, testing the edge of his hunting knife before handing it to her. But true strength isn't just about survival. It's about remembering what makes life worth surviving for. He'd smiled, then eyes crinkling at the corners, his rough hand gentle on her shoulder. "Remember that when the world feels too harsh?" How could the world be harsher than this? Clara's gaze fell on the small carved box now lying shattered near her father's body. Empty. The sacred Comanche objects, entrusted to her father by a tribal elder who had recognized his genuine respect for native cultures, were gone. They took them. She whispered, horror rising like bile in her throat. Her father's words echoed. "These objects are more than trinkets, Clara. They're spiritual guardians of sacred places. To remove them is profound sacrilege." The bandits had sealed their own fates without knowing it, and perhaps hers as well. 6 riders had appeared like demons from the shimmering heat yesterday afternoon. Clara had watched through a crack in the wagon's hidden compartment as her father tried to surrender peacefully, offering their valuables. The bandits had wanted more than possessions. They had wanted blood. Clara pressed her palms against her eyes, willing away the tears that threatened to drown her. There would be time for grief later. Now was for survival. With trembling hands that seemed disconnected from her body, she gathered what supplies remained unlooted: a canteen half full of water, her father's hunting knife, a small pouch of jerky, and her mother's shawl that had fallen beneath the wagon. In her mother's pocket, she found a small leather pouch she'd never seen before. Inside was a beaded bracelet of intricate design, clearly Comanche work, and a lock of dark hair tied with sinew. Clara stared at it, puzzled. Why would her mother carry such things? Pushing the question aside, she tucked the pouch into her dress pocket. The prairie sun beat down mercilessly as she used rocks and bare hands to bury her parents, marking their grave with her mother's cherished silver locket. With each stone, she placed competing emotions warred within her: crushing grief, numbing shock, and beneath it all, a cold, focused fury that sharpened her senses. "I'll find them." She promised the silent mounds, her voice steadier than she felt. They'll pay for what they've done. Night approached as Clara shouldered her meager supplies. The nearest settlement was a 2-day walk across open country, but staying meant certain death from exposure predators or the bandits' return. They had seen her face before the attack. They would know she was a witness. The vastness of the Texas plains stretched before her, indifferent to her tragedy. As darkness fell, bringing a bone-chilling cold that seeped through her thin dress, Clara huddled beneath a scraggly mesquite tree, clutching her father's knife. One day at a time. She murmured her father's favorite saying when faced with overwhelming challenges. One foot in front of the other. Sleep came in fitful bursts, disturbed by nightmares of leering faces and gunshots. In her dreams, painted symbols like those on the stolen artifacts glowed with an eerie blue light, and a woman's voice called to her from somewhere deep in the earth, words in a language she didn't understand, yet somehow recognized. "Find the Heartstone," the voice seemed to say. "Blood of 2 worlds must return." Clara startled awake before dawn, and the dream still vivid in her mind. A cold emptiness had settled in her chest, not the raw agony of yesterday, but something deeper and more permanent, like a cavity where something vital had been excavated. She wondered if this hollow feeling would ever leave her, or if it was simply part of who she was now, Clara Blackburn, orphan survivor. She walked until her feet bled, following the rutted wagon trail toward civilization. By midday, she spotted a column of smoke rising in the distance. Hope flaring briefly in her chest before being extinguished by recognition. 3 men on horseback loitered around a small fire, passing a bottle between them. Clara dropped to her belly and the tall grass heart hammering against her ribs. Even at this distance, she recognized them, 3 of the 6 bandits from the attack, including their leader, a scarred, barrel-chested man, and the others called Blackwood. Too late, one of them had spotted movement and was pointing in her direction. "Well, now look what we got here, boys," Blackwood called as they approached on horseback, his voice carrying across the prairie like the rattle of a snake. "Thought we got all of you folks yesterday. Seems we missed one." Clara scrambled backward, knife clutched in her trembling hand. "Stay back," she demanded, fighting to keep her voice from breaking. The men laughed, circling her like wolves cornering prey. Blackwood's face was a network of scars, his teeth yellowed and broken beneath a heavy mustache. His eyes held nothing human, just cold calculation and cruel amusement. "I can't do that, little lady," he drawled, dismounting with casual menace. "You've seen our faces. Can't have no witnesses." "I won't tell anyone," Clara pleaded, though she knew it was futile. These men had murdered without hesitation. "Ain't just about that no more," said the second man, leaner than the others, with eyes like chips of ice. "We found out what them trinkets was we took. Some kind of Indian magic things. Worth a fortune to the right buyer." Clara felt her stomach twist. "They're sacred. They belong to the Comanche people. My father was protecting them." Blackwood spat on the ground, his expression darkening. "Your pa shouldn't have been messing with Indian business. Now look where it got him." He drew a weathered revolver from his holster. "Nothing personal, girl. Just can't leave loose ends." Clara raised her knife, knowing it was useless against their weapons, but refusing to die without resistance. The man cocked his pistol, aiming it at her chest. Time seemed to slow as Clara stared down the barrel, an image of her parents flashing behind her eyelids. Was this how they had felt in their final moments? Terrified, yet defiant. The snarl came from nowhere, a sound so primal and ferocious it seemed to vibrate in her very bones. Her eyes flew open to see a massive gray wolf lunging from the tall grass, jaws wide and teeth bared. It was enormous, far larger than any wolf she'd ever heard described, its coat the color of storm clouds with markings like symbols woven into the fur. The bandit's horse reared in terror, throwing its rider to the ground. The pistol discharged harmlessly into the air as the wolf landed between Clara and her attacker's, hackles raised, and a continuous growl rumbling from its chest. It didn't attack, just stood there, a living shield, its amber eyes fixed on the men with terrifying intelligence. Jesus Christ! The lean bandit shouted, struggling to control his panicked horse. Shoot the damn thing, Blackwood! The fallen man scrambled for his dropped weapon, but the wolf's growl intensified, causing him to freeze. For an endless moment, no one moved. The bandits, Clara, and the massive wolf locked in a tableau of tension. Then, as if responding to some unheard command, the wolf took one menacing step forward. That was enough. The bandits retreated to their horses, mounting quickly. "This ain't over," Blackwood shouted as they wheeled their mounts around his face, contorted with rage and fear. "That wolf won't protect you forever, girl. We know where you're headed, and we'll be waiting." Clara watched in disbelief as the men galloped away, their dust trail disappearing into the horizon. Only then did she realize she'd been holding her breath. She exhaled shakily, turning to face the wolf that had inexplicably saved her life. It stood motionless, watching her with amber eyes that held an intelligence too profound to be animal. Up close, she could see distinctive markings in its fur patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like the symbols she'd glimpsed on the stolen artifacts. A ragged piece of leather hung from its neck, bearing unfamiliar markings. "Thank you," Clara whispered, feeling oddly certain the creature could understand her. The wolf's posture relaxed slightly, though its gaze remained fixed on her. Then, to Clara's astonishment, it sat on its haunches, still watching her, with that unnerving intensity. "Are you waiting for something?" she asked, feeling foolish for speaking to an animal, yet unable to shake the sense that this was no ordinary wolf. "He waits for my command." The deep voice came from behind her, causing Clara to whirl around in panic, knife raised. A man stood there, tall and straight-backed, his long black hair adorned with a single eagle feather. His face was weathered by sun and time, eyes dark and penetrating beneath a strong brow. He wore buckskin leggings and a cotton shirt, and at his waist hung a knife and what appeared to be a medicine pouch. Clara recognized immediately this was a Comanche warrior. Fear gripped her anew. The stories settlers told about the Comanche were terrifying tales of merciless raids and torture. But something in the man's demeanor kept her from fleeing. There was a stillness about him, a gravity that spoke of wisdom rather than violence. "The wolf protected me," Clara said, her voice barely audible. The man nodded, once his expression unreadable. "Shadow Walker does not offer his protection lightly. You must carry something of value." "I don't have anything," Clara responded, gesturing to her tattered dress and empty hands. "Those men, they killed my parents yesterday. They stole everything, including Comanche artifacts my father was transporting." The warrior's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "I am Night Prowler." He finally said, his voice rich and measured. "The wolf says you speak of sacred objects." Clara's eyes widened. "You understand him?" A ghost of a smile touched Night Prowler's lips. "We understand each other. The wolf people and my people have shared this land since the beginning of time." Clara hesitated, then decided truth was her only option. "My father was transporting Comanche artifacts to Fort Smith for protection. Sacred things." She swallowed hard. "Those men stole them. They said they're going to sell them." Something flashed in Night Prowler's eyes. Anger, or perhaps pain. Shadow Walker growled softly beside him, as if in response to the man's emotions. These sacred items they were wrapped in, hide marked with symbols. Night Prowler asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Clara nodded. "Yes, my father said they were very powerful, very important to your people." Night Prowler was silent for a moment, seeming to commune silently with the wolf. His fingers brushed the medicine pouch at his waist, and Clara noticed a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow, old but deep. "The men who took these things, they will return for you," he said finally, each word measured. "You have seen their faces, and they fear witnesses. He gestured to the vast landscape around them. You cannot survive alone, not with such men hunting you. Fear clutched at Clara's heart because she knew he spoke the truth. The bandits would return, and next time there might be no wolf to save her. What should I do? She asked, desperation edging her voice. You will come with me. Night Prowler stated simply. These sacred objects must be recovered before great harm is done. And you, his dark eyes seemed to look into her very soul. You are now part of this story whether you wish it or not. Clara looked from the imposing Comanche warrior to the massive wolf at his side. Every instinct told her to be afraid to run from this strange pair. But where would she go? The wilderness would kill her as surely as the bandits would. Why would you help me? She challenged, needing to understand. I'm nothing to you. Night Prowler's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened almost imperceptibly. My people have suffered much at the hands of men like those who killed your parents. I have seen too many innocent ones die. He paused, a shadow of old grief passing across his face. The wolf has chosen to protect you. That is enough for me. Shadow Walker approached Clara slowly, sniffing at her hand. After a moment's hesitation, she reached out and lightly touched the animal's massive head. The fur was coarse but warm, and the wolf allowed the contact briefly before moving back to Night Prowler's side. We must move, Night Prowler said, already turning toward the east. Those men will gather their courage and return with more guns. Where are we going? Clara asked, hurrying to keep pace with his long strides. To find what was stolen, he replied, eyes scanning the horizon, and to prevent a great darkness from spreading across this land. As they walked, Shadow Walker ranged ahead of them, occasionally disappearing into the brush, only to reappear on another rise. Clara found herself drawn to the wolf's movements. There was something almost hypnotic in the way it navigated the landscape, as if following invisible trails only it could perceive. How did you find me? Clara finally asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Night Prowler glanced down at her, evaluating how much to share. Shadow Walker led me. For 3 days he has been restless, drawing me eastward. His gaze turned to the horizon. Now I understand why. Because of me? Clara asked, puzzled. Because of what was stolen, Night Prowler corrected. The sacred guardians call out when removed from their proper place. The wolf hears their cries. Clara digested this, trying to reconcile it with everything she'd been taught. Her father had respected native beliefs without fully embracing them. He'd considered himself a scholar, an observer. But there was nothing scholarly about the massive wolf that had appeared exactly when she needed protection, or the warrior who spoke of sacred guardians as if they were living entities. My father said the artifacts were powerful, she ventured, but he never said they could call for help. Night Prowler's stride faltered almost imperceptibly. Your father understood more than most white men, he said carefully. But some knowledge is not shared with outsiders. They paused at a small creek where Night Prowler showed Clara how to drink without disturbing the water's surface. As she quenched her thirst, her reflection wavered in the clear stream, a girl she barely recognized, face smudged with dirt and dried tears eyes, older than they had been 2 days before. Those men said the artifacts are worth a fortune, she said, straightening. That they have a buyer. Night Prowler's expression darkened. There are always those who seek to possess power they do not understand. He studied the western horizon where the sun had begun its descent. We must make camp soon. The night brings cold winds to these plains. They found shelter in a shallow ravine, where Night Prowler built a small fire with practiced efficiency. From his pack he produced dried meat and prairie turnips, which he shared without comment. Clara ate gratefully the first real food she'd had since the attack. As darkness enclosed them, the distant howls of coyotes echoed across the plains. Shadow Walker, who had settled at the edge of their camp, lifted his massive head at the sound, but made no reply. "He doesn't answer them," Clara observed. "Shadow Walker is not of their kind." Night Prowler explained, feeding small sticks into the fire. "He runs with the spirit wolves, those who guard the sacred places of my people." Clara pulled her mother's shawl tighter around her shoulders, remembering the strange leather pouch she'd found. Hesitantly, she removed it from her pocket. "I found this with my mother's things," she said, opening it to reveal the beaded bracelet and lock of hair. "Do you know what it is?" Night Prowler froze, his eyes fixed on the items. For the first time, Clara saw genuine shock crack his stoic demeanor. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "It was in my mother's pocket." Clara replied, unsettled by his reaction. "I've never seen it before." Night Prowler reached out slowly, as if the items might disappear. "May I?" Clara nodded, placing the pouch in his weathered hand. He examined the bracelet with reverence, fingers tracing the intricate beadwork. "This was made for a child," he said finally. "A boy. The pattern speaks of wolf medicine protection for one who walks between worlds." He lifted the lock of hair. "This is a memory token of someone deeply loved." "But why would my mother have Comanche things?" Clara asked. Night Prowler's eyes met hers, searching. "What did your father tell you of his childhood?" "His parents." Clara frowned, trying to remember. "Not much. I know my grandmother died before I was born. Papa said she was beautiful with dark hair and eyes that could see into your soul." A memory surfaced. "He didn't speak of his parents often. I once asked why, and he said some memories were too heavy to carry into the light." Night Prowler closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing a blow. When he opened them, there was a new intensity in his gaze. "Clara Blackburn," he said slowly, "I believe your father carried a secret. These items," he gestured to the bracelet and hair, "they are made in the style of my mother's family. And this pattern," he traced the beadwork, "it was given only to children with the gift of wolf speaking." Clara stared at him, uncomprehending. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that your father may not have been entirely what he seemed," Night Prowler replied carefully. "The blood of my people may have flowed in his veins." The suggestion was so outlandish that Clara nearly laughed. "That's impossible. My father was John Blackburn, a surveyor, a white man. Many children were taken during the wars," Night Prowler said quietly. "Some were adopted by white families. Some forgot their origins or chose to forget." Clara shook her head firmly. "You're wrong. I would have known. He would have told me." Night Prowler returned the items to the pouch and handed it back to Clara. "Perhaps," he acknowledged. "Or perhaps some secrets are kept to protect those we love." Clara tucked the pouch away, disturbed by the implications. It couldn't be true. Yet it would explain her father's unusual knowledge of native customs, his fluency in Comanche, his determination to protect the artifacts. "Sleep now," Night Prowler instructed, rising to his feet. "Tomorrow we hunt." Clara curled up near the fire, using her arm as a pillow. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully haunted by images of her parents' lifeless bodies and Blackwood's cruel smile. But new images intruded as well, of the woman from her earlier dream, now clearer beckoning from within a cave mouth, her face painted with the same symbols Clara had seen on the stolen artifacts. "Find me." The woman seemed to say, her voice like wind through stone. "The spirit stone calls to the blood of both worlds." Clara startled awake before dawn, and the dream still vivid in her mind. Night Prowler was already alert, returning from scouting with Shadow Walker at his heels. He carried a handful of prairie turnips and some prickly pear fruit, which he offered without comment. "Thank you," she said, accepting the humble breakfast gratefully. As she ate, she noticed Night Prowler examining something on the wolf's fur, a small object that had become entangled near its neck. "What is that?" she asked, curiosity overcoming her lingering unease from the dream. Night Prowler's expression darkened as he held up a small piece of decorated animal hide. "A fragment of the stolen medicine bundle," he said grimly. "Shadow Walker must have torn it loose during yesterday's confrontation." Clara moved closer to examine it. The piece of hide was decorated with intricate symbols painted in red and black symbols that matched those she'd seen in her dream. A chill ran down her spine. "I dreamed of these markings," she confessed, "and of a woman in a cave with painted symbols on her face." She spoke of a spirit stone. Night Prowler's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly intense. "You saw the cave mother." "I don't know who she was," Clara replied, unsettled by his reaction. "But she spoke to me, said something about the blood of both worlds and a stone that calls." Night Prowler was silent for a long moment, studying her with new interest. Then he carefully placed the fragment in his medicine pouch. "The sacred cave is hidden deep in Comanche territory. Few know its location." His eyes narrowed. "But this suggests the thieves do. And your dream, it is a sign." Clara's mind reeled. "A sign of what?" "That you have a role to play in what comes," Night Prowler said. "The spirits rarely speak so directly to outsiders." He stood, decision made. "We must move faster than I thought. The sacred objects must be recovered before the full moon." "What happens at the full moon?" Clara asked, gathering her few possessions. "The barrier between worlds grows thin," Night Prowler explained, already starting eastward. "If the sacred guardians are not in their place by then, the cave will be vulnerable to those who would desecrate it. And the spirit stone, the heart of our medicine, could be taken." As they traveled, Night Prowler explained more about the sacred objects and their purpose. The bundle contained ceremonial items infused with powerful medicine objects that had been blessed by generations of Comanche shamans. They were meant to protect the hidden cave where the tribe's most potent spiritual artifacts were kept. "What's in this cave that's so important?" Clara asked as they paused to drink from a small spring. Night Prowler was silent for a moment, considering how much to reveal. "The cave holds our people's connection to the spirit world," he finally said. "Paintings made by the first people when the world was new. Medicine bundles that maintain balance between our world and the next." His voice lowered. "At its heart lies what my people call the Spirit Stone, said to be a piece of the star that fell to earth in the time of the first people. And this stone has power," Clara pressed. "After great power," Night Prowler confirmed. "It strengthens the barrier between our world and the spirit world, preventing chaos. But in the wrong hands, during certain times when that barrier is naturally thin, like the full moon," Clara supplied. Night Prowler nodded grimly. "The stone could be used to open a path between worlds to draw power across. But such an act would destroy the balance. It would bring great suffering." Clara tried to grasp the enormity of what he described. It was different from her own religious understanding, but she recognized the profound importance such beliefs held. "And you think that's what these men plan to do? Use this stone somehow?" "Not the men themselves," Night Prowler said. "They are but tools. It is their master who seeks the stone." Their master, a man named Hargrove, Night Prowler, replied, his face hardening. "A collector of Indian artifacts, a desecrator of graves, a hunter of sacred power." Clara absorbed this, connecting it to her father's mission. "My father was taking the artifacts to Fort Smith for safekeeping. He must have known this Hargrove was after them." Night Prowler's gaze was penetrating. Your father knew many things, perhaps more than he shared with you. They traveled for 2 more days, moving with careful haste across the unforgiving landscape. Night Prowler taught Clara how to walk silently, how to find water in seemingly barren ground, how to read the subtle signs of animals and men passing. Shadow Walker ranged ahead of them, occasionally returning to guide them along invisible trails. Clara found herself adapting more quickly than she would have thought possible. The grief for her parents remained a hollow ache in her chest, but alongside it grew a fierce determination. Each skill she learned from Night Prowler was another weapon against those who had destroyed her family. On the 3rd morning, they crested a rise to see a small town. In the distance, a cluster of wooden buildings huddled against the vast emptiness of the plains. Redemption. Night Prowler said, naming the settlement with subtle irony. A place where men with no honor gather. Clara studied the distant buildings. You think the bandits are there? They will stop to celebrate their theft, to drink and boast. Night Prowler replied with certainty. Men like that always do. They observed the town from a distance, concealed among scattered boulders. Clara felt her heart racing at the prospect of entering a place where her pursuers might be waiting. What if they see us? They will not see us, Night Prowler assured her. And we will not enter together. He turned to face her. You will go alone. Alone. Clara stared at him in disbelief. But they'll recognize me. They expect a frightened child, Night Prowler said, studying her thoughtfully. We will give them something else to see. From his pack he produced a bundle wrapped in soft hide. Inside was a simple dress of brown, homespun, worn but clean, and a faded bonnet. These belong to my wife, he explained quietly. They will help hide who you are. Clara accepted the clothing with reverence, moved by the offering of something so personal. I'll be careful with them, she promised, her voice soft. Night Prowler nodded. There is one more thing. From his medicine pouch, he withdrew a small container of dark pigment. With practiced fingers, he applied it to Clara's face in subtle patterns, darkening her eyebrows, adding the suggestion of shadows that altered the appearance of her features without looking unnatural. Now you are someone new, he declared, satisfied with his work. A traveler passing through. No one will connect you to the girl they hunt. Clara wasn't convinced, but she trusted Night Prowler's judgment. What am I looking for in town? Listen more than you speak, he instructed. Find where the men gather to drink. Learn what they say of their plans. His dark eyes held hers steadily. Do not take risks. If you are discovered, run. Shadow Walker and I will be watching. The transformation complete. Clara approached Redemption from the main road, trying to adopt the weary but purposeful gait of a traveler. The town was even smaller than it had appeared from a distance, a single dusty street lined with false-fronted buildings. Men lounged on porches or leaned against hitching posts, their eyes following her with undisguised interest as she passed. Clara kept her gaze down, heart hammering. The bonnet helped conceal her face, but she felt exposed, vulnerable. She headed for the largest building, a saloon called the Broken Spoke, where raucous laughter spilled from open doors. A group of women clustered near the entrance, their painted faces and gaudy dresses marking them as saloon girls. Clara hesitated, uncertain how to proceed, when one of the women noticed her. You lost, honey, the woman asked, not unkindly. She was older than the others, with tired eyes, but a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her heavily powdered face. I'm looking for work, Clara improvised, pitching her voice slightly deeper than normal. Just passing through. The woman studied her for a moment, eyes sharp despite her easy manner. Bit young for this kind of work, she remarked, her painted eyebrows arching. But Sadie's down with fever and we're short-handed. Can you carry trays without spilling? Clara nodded eagerly, seizing the unexpected opportunity. "Yes, ma'am." "Name's Rosie," the woman said with a wry twist to her painted mouth. "And don't ma'am me, honey. Makes me feel ancient." She winked, the gesture oddly maternal despite her profession. "This town'll eat a young thing like you alive if you let it. Stay sharp, keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. Men talk more when they think no one's listening, and in this business information's worth more than the coins they toss you." Clara followed Rosie through a side door into the noisy saloon. The air inside was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of spilled whiskey. Men crowded around tables gambling and drinking, while a battered piano plunked out a tinny tune in the corner. "Just carry drinks," Rosie instructed, handing Clara a stained apron. "Don't chat, don't smile too much. Any trouble, you holler for Tom." She nodded toward the burly barkeeper polishing a glass with a filthy rag. "He keeps order with that shotgun under the bar. Man's aim is terrible, but the noise alone stops most fights. Subtle as a thunderstorm, our Tom, but effective." For the next hour, Clara moved through the crowded room delivering whiskey and beer to increasingly intoxicated patrons. She kept her face averted, heart jumping whenever someone addressed her directly. All the while, her eyes and ears searched for any sign of the bandits. Her vigilance was rewarded when a burst of familiar laughter cut through the din. At a corner table sat 3 of the men who had attacked her family's wagon, including Blackwood, the scarred leader. Clara nearly dropped her tray, forcing herself to turn away and breathe deeply. "Hey, new girl," Blackwood's voice called out. "Bring another bottle." Clara froze, panic rising in her throat. She couldn't refuse without drawing attention, but approaching them meant risking recognition. With trembling hands, she took a fresh bottle from the bar and made her way to their table, keeping her face shadowed by the bonnet. "About time," Blackwood grumbled as she placed the bottle before him. "Ain't seen you before." "Just started today," Clara murmured, already turning to leave. "Hold on there." Blackwood's hand shot out, grasping her wrist in a grip that made her wince. "Let's have a look at you." Clara's pulse roared in her ears as she reluctantly faced him, keeping her eyes downcast. The disguise Night Prowler had created seemed flimsy now, with the bandit's face inches from her own. Blackwood squinted at her through drunken eyes, his breath hot on her face. "You remind me of someone," he muttered, his grip tightening. "Something about them eyes." "Now let her be Blackwood." A new voice interrupted, cultured, authoritative, with an undercurrent of disdain. "The girl has work to do." Clara glanced up to see a well-dressed man standing beside their table, expensive suit, neatly trimmed beard, intelligent eyes, cold as a winter sky. The 3 bandits straightened almost imperceptibly at his arrival. "Mr. Hargrove," Blackwood acknowledged, releasing Clara's wrist. "Just having some fun." "Your idea of fun continues to disappoint me," Hargrove replied coolly. His eyes flicked dismissively over Clara, seeing nothing more than a servant. "Go on, girl, and bring another glass." Clara retreated legs, weak with relief, yet her mind racing. This was Hargrove, the man Night Prowler had named the one seeking the Spirit Stone. Up close, he didn't look like a grave robber or a desecrator. He looked like any prosperous businessman she might have seen in Fort Smith. But there was something in those cold eyes that chilled her more than Blackwood's crude threats. She fetched a clean glass and returned this time, lingering nearby, pretending to wipe down an adjacent table while straining to hear their conversation. "Telling you it must be done during the full moon," Hargrove was saying, his cultured voice lowered. "The cave's location is precise a half-day's ride east of Serpent Ridge." "2 more days, then," Blackwood replied, dropping his voice. "We go in, you do your business, we get paid. Simple." "Nothing about this is simple," Hargrove corrected sharply. "The ritual requires specific timing. The items you recovered are merely keys, it's what lies within the cave that matters. Clara's hands stilled on her rag. Ritual, this was more than simple destruction or theft. What about the girl? Blackwood asked. Still out there somewhere. Forget the girl. Hargrove dismissed. She's nothing. A child alone in the wilderness is already dead. His voice dropped further, forcing Clara to strain to hear. After 20 years of searching, I'm hours away from what I've sought. The power of the Spirit Stone will finally allow me to breach the veil. Breach what veil? Blackwood asked, clearly confused. Hargrove's lips curled in a patronizing smile. The veil between worlds, you simpleton. Between the living and the dead. A strange intensity entered his eyes. Do you know what it's like to lose everything that matters? To have it ripped away while you stand helpless? The scarred outlaw shifted uncomfortably. Ain't my business what you want with Indian magic, he muttered. Indeed it isn't. Hargrove agreed, his composure returning. Your business is to ensure no one interferes. He leaned forward. The cave must be secured before midnight of the full moon. The guardians must be arranged precisely as I've shown you. And no one must interrupt the ritual once it begins. Speaking of problems, one of the other men interrupted. That ranger's been asking questions at the trading post. Hayes, the one who don't take bribes. Hargrove's expression hardened. I'll deal with Hayes if necessary. By the time anyone figures anything out, it will be too late. His voice softened, taking on an almost reverent quality. She'll be back with me. After all these years, Elizabeth will return. Clara slipped away as they fell into a discussion of payment terms. She had heard enough Hargrove wasn't just after power or destruction. He wanted to use the Spirit Stone to bring someone back from the dead. Someone named Elizabeth. The desperation in his voice when he spoke the name sent chills through her. This was no mere collector. This was a man consumed by obsession. She continued her work mind-racing with the need to get this information to Night Prowler. An hour passed before she found an opportunity to slip away during a particularly rowdy card game that drew everyone's attention. Clara hurried down the back alley behind the saloon, removing the apron and bonnet. Night had fallen, and shadows concealed her as she made her way to the edge of town where Night Prowler had promised to wait. A low whistle from a cluster of cottonwoods signaled his presence. Clara hurried toward the sound relief washing over her. They're planning a ritual at the sacred cave, she reported breathlessly. During the full moon, 2 days from now. Their leader is there, Hargrove. He was talking about breaching a veil between worlds, about bringing someone back from the dead. A woman named Elizabeth. Night Prowler's face remained impassive, but his eyes flashed with alarm. This is worse than I feared. He seeks not just to take power from the Spirit Stone, but to corrupt its purpose entirely. He gripped Clara's shoulder. What else did he say? Clara closed her eyes, recalling the conversation. He said the stolen items are merely keys, and that he spent 20 years searching for this cave, that they need to arrange the guardians precisely for the ritual. Night Prowler's expression grew grave. To use the stone to pierce the boundary between life and death. It would tear open the fabric between all worlds. The spirits would flood into our reality, untethered, unguided. His voice lowered. The land itself would bleed. Clara felt her blood run cold at his words. Can he really do that? Bring someone back from the dead? Not as she was. Night Prowler said grimly. The dead who are forced to return are shadows of themselves, hollow and hungry. They belong to the spirit world, and tearing them back causes great suffering to them and to the living. He looked east toward the distant hills. We must reach the cave before them. As they retrieved Shadow Walker, and slipped away from redemption under cover of darkness, Clara found herself drawn back to the strange dream, the woman in the cave speaking of the blood of both worlds, and Hargrove's haunted eyes when he spoke of Elizabeth. Night Prowler, she ventured as they hurried eastward through the darkness. Who guards the Spirit Stone? The Comanche warrior was silent for several steps before answering. Since the time of the first people, it has been guarded by those with the gift of wolf speaking, those whose blood connects them to both the human world and the spirit world. Like you? Clara asked. Night Prowler nodded once. I was chosen as a boy when Shadow Walker's grandfather came to me in a vision. His voice carried a weight of responsibility. Each generation, a guardian is chosen. When one guardian passes, another must take their place. Clara hesitated before asking her next question. And my father, was he? Night Prowler's stride faltered. I believe John Blackburn was born Toka Murrieta, he said quietly. A boy taken during a raid on our winter camp 25 summers ago. A boy with the gift of wolf speaking who was being trained to become a guardian. Clara felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. That can't be true, she whispered. But even as she spoke, pieces began to fit together. Her father's knowledge of Comanche weighs his dedication to protecting the artifacts, his occasional slips into a language she didn't recognize when he was exhausted or injured. The bracelet you found was made for his naming ceremony. Night Prowler continued. The hair is his mother's, my aunt's. She died in the raid that took him. You're saying we're related? Clara asked, stunned. Distant cousins. Night Prowler confirmed. Though in Comanche, thinking that makes us close family. He paused. I searched for him for many years, but eventually believed him dead. It was only when Shadow Walker led me to you that I began to suspect. Why wouldn't he tell me? Clara asked, hurt mingling with confusion. Why hide who he was? The world is cruel to those who walk between worlds. Night Prowler replied. Perhaps he sought to protect you from that cruelty. Or perhaps after years among white people, he came to believe it was safer to forget. They traveled through the night and into the following day, stopping only briefly to rest and eat. Despite her physical exhaustion, Clara's mind remained alert, churning with questions about her father's hidden past. If Night Prowler was right, she wasn't just Clara Blackburn, daughter of a surveyor. She was the daughter of Toka Murrieta, a Comanche with the gift of wolf speaking, and that made her something she never imagined possible. By evening of the second day, the terrain began to change. The flat plains gave way to rolling hills, and in the distance loomed a distinctive ridge of red rock, twisted into shapes that indeed resembled serpents frozen in stone. Serpent Ridge, Night Prowler confirmed, pointing to the formation. Beyond lies the Sacred Valley. They made camp in a hidden draw, conserving their strength for what lay ahead. Clara sensed Night Prowler's growing tension, though his face remained stoic. What will we do when we find them? She finally asked. There are at least 6 of them, and they have guns. Night Prowler was silent for a long moment. I cannot allow the ritual to take place, he said finally. Whatever the cost, Clara felt a chill at his words. You can't fight them all. Perhaps not, he acknowledged. But Shadow Walker and I have fought against worse odds. His dark eyes met hers steadily. You, however, will remain hidden. This is not your battle. It became my battle when they killed my parents. Clara responded, a fierce determination rising within her. I want to help. Night Prowler studied her with those penetrating eyes. Courage is good, he finally said. But it must be paired with wisdom. We will find a way for you to help that does not place you in their gun sights. As darkness deepened, Shadow Walker grew restless, pacing at the edge of their small camp. The The wolf's ears twitched constantly, and his amber eyes reflected the moonlight as he gazed eastward. He senses something, Night Prowler murmured, rising to his feet. We are not alone. Clara strained her ears, but heard nothing beyond the normal sounds of the wilderness at night. The bandits, I do not know, Night Prowler replied, gathering his few possessions. But we must move, now. They broke camp quickly, following Shadow Walker as he led them on a circuitous route through the darkness. The wolf moved with purpose, occasionally stopping to sniff the air before continuing. After nearly an hour of this cautious progress, Clara heard what had disturbed the wolf of the distant but distinctive sound of horses moving at a walk, their tack jingling softly in the night. It's them, she whispered, recognizing the particular laugh that carried on the night air. Blackwood. Night Prowler nodded grimly. They travel by night to avoid being seen. He gestured toward a rise ahead. We must reach that vantage point, see what we face. They crept to the top of the rise, lying flat against the earth, to avoid being silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Below, moving along a dry creek bed, rode 6 men the bandits Clara remembered from the wagon attack, plus Hargrove himself. They traveled in single file, leading pack horses laden with supplies. They carried torches and oil. Night Prowler observed grimly. And something else. He pointed to a wooden box strapped to Hargrove's saddle, ornately carved and bound with silver bands. What is that? Clara whispered. Ritual implements. Night Prowler replied, his voice tight with anger. Hargrove has done this before, taken sacred power for his own use. Clara studied the man who had ordered her parents' death. In the moonlight, Hargrove looked ordinary enough, a prosperous gentleman on an expedition. But there was something in his bearing, a coiled intensity, that belied his civilized appearance. He rode slightly apart from the others, occasionally stroking the silver-banded box, with an intimacy that unsettled Clara. I heard him in the saloon, she whispered. He spoke of someone named Elizabeth, that he wants to bring her back. Night Prowler's expression grew troubled. A man driven by such loss is dangerous beyond measure. He will sacrifice anyone to achieve his goal, and we have to stop them. She said, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and rage. We will, Night Prowler assured her, though his expression was troubled. But first we must reach the cave before them. There is another way, harder but faster. They retreated from the rise and struck out across country, Shadow Walker leading the way. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, jagged rocks and steep inclines that had to be navigated in near darkness. Clara's hands were soon scraped raw from climbing, but she pressed on without complaint, driven by determination. As they climbed, a strange sensation began to build within Clara, a humming energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. It wasn't painful, but it grew stronger with each step toward their destination, as if something was calling to her, pulling her forward. Night Prowler, she whispered during a brief rest. I feel something, like a pulling. The warrior studied her intently. The cave calls to you, he said simply, as I suspected it might, because of my father, because of his blood in me. Night Prowler nodded slowly. The gift of wolf speaking passes through bloodlines. If your father was indeed Toka, then you carry that gift as well. His eyes searched hers. Have you dreamed of wolves before, of running with them? Clara started to shake her head, then stopped as memories surfaced, childhood dreams she had forgotten of, racing through moonlit prairies with gray shapes loping beside her, of understanding words carried on the wind that no human throat had uttered. I thought they were just dreams, she whispered. Dreams are how the spirit world first speaks to us, Night Prowler replied. Your father must have recognized the signs, but chose to protect you from that knowledge. They continued their difficult climb, from the pulling sensation growing stronger in Clara's chest. Finally, they reached the edge of a hidden valley. As false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they could make out an ancient cottonwood tree at its center, its massive branches creating a canopy over a small spring. And there, partially concealed by undergrowth on the valley's far side, was the dark opening of a cave. "On the sacred place," Night Prowler said reverently, "we have arrived first." They made their way down into the valley, approaching the cave with respectful silence. Shadow Walker remained outside as Night Prowler led Clara to the entrance, bowing slightly before ducking inside. The interior was larger than Clara had expected, extending deep into the hillside. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, she gasped in wonder. The walls were covered with paintings, ancient images of hunters and prey spirit beings, and ceremonies rendered in red, black, and yellow ochre. Some were faded with incredible age, while others seemed more recent, layer upon layer of sacred history. But what drew Clara's attention most powerfully was a painting that dominated the rear wall, a woman standing with wolves around her arms, raised toward a glowing object that hung in the painted sky above. It was the woman from her dream rendered in pigments that still somehow seemed vibrant after countless years. "The Cave Mother," Night Prowler said softly, following her gaze. "The first of our people to speak with the wolf spirits. She who received the gift of the spirit stone." At the center of the main chamber stood a stone altar, and around the cave's perimeter were niches containing bundles wrapped in hide medicine bundles, like the one that had been stolen from Clara's father. "These paintings," Clara whispered, awestruck, "they're beautiful. They tell the story of my people from the beginning of time." Night Prowler explained, his voice low and reverent. "Each generation adds to the story. When a child is born, their spirit path is painted here. When an elder dies, their journey to the next world is recorded." As he spoke, Clara noticed something strange. The painting seemed to shimmer slightly, as if moving in an unfelt breeze. And beneath the silence, she could almost hear whispers, countless voices speaking together in a language she couldn't understand, but somehow recognized. "Can you hear them?" she asked hesitantly. Night Prowler looked at her sharply. "Hear what?" "The voices," Clara replied, turning slowly as the whispers seemed to surround her. "They're coming from the paintings." Night Prowler's expression grew intent. "The ancestors speak only to those with the gift. That you hear them confirms what I suspected." He moved to the altar, examining it with concern. "The guardian spirits are missing, as I feared. Without them, the cave's protection is weakened." He placed his hand on the stone altar, closing his eyes in concentration. "The spirit stone remains deep within the cave. But I sense its unease. It knows danger approaches." "What can we do?" Clara asked. Night Prowler's straightened decision made. "I will create new protection, temporary, but perhaps strong enough." He removed items from his medicine pouch, feathers, small bundles of herbs, a carved stone. "This will take time. You must watch for the bandits' approach." Clara nodded and hurried back to the cave entrance. Shadow Walker was already alert, his attention fixed on the valley's eastern approach. She settled beside the wolf, drawing comfort from his solid presence. The sun rose, fully casting the valley in golden light that made the spring water glitter like scattered gems. In daylight, Clara could see just how isolated and hidden this place was, surrounded by high ridges on all sides, with only a narrow entrance that was easily missed unless you knew where to look. As she kept watch, Clara found herself dwelling on Night Prowler's revelation about her father. She had never questioned her identity before. She had been Clara Blackburn, daughter of John and Mary, with a clear understanding of her place in the world. Now that certainty was shattered, replaced by questions that had no easy answers. If her father had been Comanche, taken as a child and raised by whites, what did that make her? "The blood of both worlds," she murmured, remembering the dream voice. Could that be why the cave seemed to call to her? Why the wolf had protected her? Why she could hear the ancestors' whispers? An hour passed, and then 2. Inside the cave, Night Prowler chanted softly, the sound occasionally reaching Clara's ears, like a distant heartbeat. Shadow Walker remained vigilant, but relaxed enough to allow Clara to stroke his thick fur. "We make an odd pair, don't we?" she murmured to the wolf. "Both protectors of things we barely understand." The wolf's amber eyes turned to her briefly, seeming to acknowledge her words before returning to their watchful gaze. When the bandits finally came, it was not from the direction Clara expected. A pebble skittering down the slope behind her was her only warning. She turned to see Blackwood and his men descending into the valley from the western ridge, leading their horses on foot to minimize noise. Hargrove walked in their midst, the wooden box clutched in his hands, his face alight with a fervor that chilled Clara's blood. She scrambled back into the cave. "They're here," she hissed. Coming from the west, Night Prowler rose swiftly from the altar, his face grim. The items he had arranged there glowed faintly in the dim light, his temporary protections in place. "Stay inside," he instructed, retrieving the knife from his belt. "No matter what happens." But as Clara began to protest, "Promise me." Night Prowler insisted, his dark eyes intense. "The cave must have a defender within, should I fall outside." Clara nodded reluctantly. "I promise." Shadow Walker had already positioned himself near the cave entrance, hackles raised and teeth bared in silent warning. Night Prowler moved to stand beside the wolf, a formidable pair backlit by the morning sun. From her position just inside the cave, Clara could see the bandits spread out as they approached, rifles raised. Hargrove stayed slightly behind them, still clutching his wooden box, his face twisted with anticipation. Blackwood stepped forward, his scarred face contorted in a sneer. "Well, if it ain't the Indian and his pet dog," he called out mockingly. "Don't that beat all trying to stop what can't be stopped?" His eyes narrowed as he scanned the cave entrance. "And I reckon the girl's in there too, ain't she the witness?" Night Prowler remained silent, his posture betraying no fear, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. "Step aside, Injun." Blackwood continued. "We got business in that cave. Doesn't have to involve you. This sacred place is not for your eyes." Night Prowler finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the small valley. "Leave now, and you may live." The bandits laughed at the apparent absurdity, one man with a knife threatening 6 armed men. "Brave talk for a dead man," Blackwood sneered. "One last chance. Move or die where you stand. This place is protected by powers you cannot understand." Night Prowler warned. "The spirits of my ancestors guard it." "Enough of this," Hargrove interrupted, stepping forward. His cultured voice carried a hard edge of command. "Kill them both. We have work to do before the moon rises." When Night Prowler didn't move, Blackwood raised his rifle. "Your choice, Injun." A tense silence hung in the air. Then with shocking suddenness, Shadow Walker lunged forward, a gray blur of motion. The massive wolf didn't attack directly, but circled the men with supernatural speed, causing confusion and panic. Horses reared and whinnied in terror as the wolf darted between them. Night Prowler seized the moment of chaos, moving with fluid grace as he charged the nearest bandit. His knife flashed in the sunlight, finding its mark before the man could aim his weapon. The bandit fell with a cry of pain, clutching his shoulder. "Shoot them!" Hargrove roared, his composure fracturing. "Kill them now." The valley erupted in gunfire. Clara pressed herself against the cave wall, heart hammering in her chest. Through the entrance, she caught glimpses of the battle Shadow Walker, harrying the bandits like a gray ghost Night Prowler, moving from cover to cover, engaging when possible before retreating. It was 2 against 6, and despite their courage and skill, Clara knew Night Prowler and Shadow Walker couldn't prevail for long. Already one of the bandits had managed to wound the wolf, a bloody streak visible on its flank as it continued its relentless assault. Night Prowler, too, had been grazed by a bullet, blood darkening his left sleeve. The battle intensified, the advantage shifting gradually to the bandits as they recovered from their initial surprise. Shadow Walker was slowing his supernatural speed, diminished by blood loss. Night Prowler had managed to wound another bandit, but he was being pushed back toward the cave entrance, his options for cover dwindling. Clara's attention was suddenly drawn deeper into the cave by a strange humming. Not a sound exactly, but a vibration she felt in her bones. She turned to see a faint blue glow emanating from a narrow passage beyond the main chamber, a passage she hadn't noticed before. She hesitated, torn between her promise to Night Prowler and the inexplicable pull of that ethereal light. Outside, she heard Night Prowler cry out in pain, followed by Blackwood's triumphant shout. "We got him, get the torches." The decision made itself. Clara ran deeper into the cave, following the pulsing blue glow. The passage twisted downward, narrowing until she had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Just as claustrophobia threatened to overwhelm her, the passage opened into a smaller chamber, perfectly circular and domed. In the center, floating inches above a stone pedestal, was a translucent blue stone the size of her fist at the source of the glow. The Spirit Stone. It pulsed with inner light, the rhythm matching Clara's heartbeat exactly. On the heart of the cave, she whispered, understanding instinctively. This was what Hargrove sought not just to destroy, but to possess. As Clara stared at the stone images, flooded her mind, swift, overwhelming visions of people and places across time. She saw the cave mother receiving the stone from a falling star. Generations of shamans drawing on its power to heal and protect. Night Prowler, as a young man, being initiated into its mysteries. But most shocking was the vision of her father, younger, dressed in white settler's clothing, but standing before this very stone. In the vision, he placed his hand upon it, just as guardians had done for generations, then turned away with tears streaming down his face. She heard his voice clear, as if he stood beside her. "I cannot be what you ask of me. Not anymore." The vision shifted to show her father meeting her mother, falling in love, choosing a different path. And as he walked away from his heritage, a shadow fell across the stone, the first intimation of the danger that would eventually come. Clara reached out her hand, hovering inches from the glowing object. The humming intensified the stone's light, pulsing faster. "You shouldn't touch that," came Hargrove's voice from behind her. Not without proper preparation. Clara whirled to find him standing in the passage entrance, his wooden box open to reveal ceremonial items arranged inside. Blood stained his expensive suit, not his own, she realized with a surge of fear. Night Prowlers. "It's over, girl," Hargrove said, his voice almost gentle. "Your Indian friend is dying outside. His wolf, too." He stepped into the chamber, eyes fixed hungrily on the Spirit Stone. "I've searched for this my entire life. Studied every text, followed every rumor, paid fortunes for even the smallest clue." "What do I?" Clara demanded, positioning herself between Hargrove and the stone. "What do you want with it?" "To correct a grave injustice," Hargrove replied, his eyes never leaving the stone. "To bring back what was taken from me." Elizabeth, Clara said, remembering the name from his conversation in the saloon. Hargrove's attention snapped to her face, surprise briefly replacing the obsession in his eyes. "You know of her. I heard you speak her name," Clara answered. "You want to bring her back from the dead." "My wife," Hargrove confirmed, a terrible grief momentarily softening his features. "Taken by fever 8 years ago. She was 32. His expression hardened again. "Death is merely a barrier, girl. A veil between worlds. With enough power, that veil can be parted." Night Prowler said people brought back aren't the same. Clara argued desperately, trying to keep herself between Hargrove and the stone. that they suffer. What does an ignorant savage know of such matters? Hargrove scoffed. I've studied the ancient texts, deciphered scrolls and tablets from a dozen cultures. All point to this stone, the star heart, the doorway, the spirit stone. It holds the power to bridge worlds. At what cost? Clara challenged. A shadow crossed Hargrove's face. There is always a cost for power, he acknowledged. But I'm prepared to pay it, even if the cost is paid by others. Clara pressed. Night Prowler said breaching the barrier would cause suffering beyond just one person. Hargrove's expression darkened. Your father said similar things, you know. Before I killed him, Clara felt as though she'd been struck. What? John Blackburn. Hargrove continued satisfaction in his tone. Or Toka, as he was once known. He worked for me years ago, translating Comanche texts, helping me locate sacred sites. He sighed theatrically, until his conscience intervened. He stole my research and disappeared with the Guardian artifacts, hoping to keep me from this place forever. You're lying. Clara insisted, though. Doubt gnawed at her. Night Prowler had confirmed her father's Comanche origins. But working with Hargrove, betraying his people's secrets, am I? Hargrove challenged, circling slowly toward the spirit stone. Ask yourself how I knew exactly where to find your wagon. How I knew which route your father would take to Fort Smith. His smile was cold. He tried to protect the stone by removing its guardians, thinking I could never find this place without them. He underestimated my resources. Clara's mind reeled with the implications. Had her father been running from Hargrove all these years? Had he known the danger when they set out on this last journey? Hargrove took advantage of her confusion to step closer to the spirit stone. You could join me. He offered, his voice suddenly solicitous. Your heritage gives you a natural connection to the stone. Together we could accomplish what neither of us could. Alone you could have your parents back, and I my Elizabeth. For a brief, terrible moment, Clara felt tempted. The stone's glow seemed to intensify, calling to something deep within her. With such power, she could undo the horror of the past days, see her parents alive again. Then she remembered her father's words. True strength isn't just about survival. It's about remembering what makes life worth surviving for. She saw now what he had meant. Not clinging desperately to what was lost, but honoring their memory by moving forward with courage and integrity. No, Clara said firmly, her resolve crystallizing. This doesn't belong to either of us. Its purpose is protection, not power. Hargrove's face hardened. Then you're as foolish as your father was. He drew a small pistol from inside his jacket. I won't kill you, your blood might be useful in the ritual. But a wounded girl can't interfere. He aimed the weapon at Clara's leg, just as heavy footsteps sounded in the passage behind him. Hargrove turned pistol swinging toward the new threat. Blackwood stumbled into the chamber, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. Hargrove, he gasped. Something's wrong, the Indian. He's not dying, and the wolf. He never finished. A massive gray shape hurtled through the passage, slamming into Blackwood with bone-crushing force. Shadow Walker's jaws closed around the bandit's throat, ending his words in a wet gurgle. Hargrove fired wildly, the bullet ricocheting off the stone walls. Before he could aim again, Night Prowler appeared in the passage entrance, blood soaking his left side, but his knife held steady in his right hand. It's over, Hargrove, the Comanche warrior said quietly. Despite his wounds, there was a terrible power in his stance, and the authority of one who guarded sacred things. No. Hargrove screamed desperation, transforming his cultured voice into something primal and broken. Not when I'm so close. He turned suddenly, not toward his attackers, but toward the spirit stone, hands outstretched to seize it. Clara, Night Prowler shouted in warning. Don't let him touch it. Clara lunged forward, instinctively reaching for the stone at the same moment as Hargrove. Their hands touched it simultaneously, his grasping in desperate need, hers in protective defiance. A blinding flash of blue-white light erupted from the contact, filling the chamber with impossible brilliance. Clara felt a surge of energy course through her body, like lightning overwhelming in its intensity. Knowledge not her own filled her mind, ancient words, forgotten rituals, the way of wolf speakers who had come before. The chamber dissolved around her, replaced by a vast, starlit plain. Before her stood the woman from the cave, painting the cave mother, her face solemn and wise. Child of two bloods. The woman said, her voice like wind through stone. The choice lies before you. Will you guard, or will you take? Clara understood that she stood at a crossroads, not just for herself, but for the balance between worlds. Hargrove's desperate grab for power had created a moment of vulnerability, a crack between realities. I will guard, Clara replied without hesitation, as my father should have done. The cave mother nodded approval in her ageless eyes. Then receive the gift and the burden. The spirit stone has chosen. The plane vanished, and Clara found herself back in the chamber, the spirit stone hovering above her outstretched palm, its glow gentler now, pulsing in perfect rhythm with her heart. On the floor lay Hargrove, curled into a fetal position, eyes open, but seeing nothing, mouth working soundlessly. Night Prowler stared in astonishment. The stone chose, he whispered, as it has always done. Clara could hardly comprehend what had happened. What's wrong with him? She asked, nodding toward Hargrove's huddled form. He sought to take what can only be given. Night Prowler explained, approaching cautiously. The stone showed him the truth of his ambition, all of it at once. The suffering his actions would cause, the chaos that would follow, the hollowness of what he sought to reclaim. His mind could not bear it. Shadow Walker padded to Clara's side, pressing against her leg in a gesture that felt like approval. Despite his injuries, the wolf's amber eyes were clear and alert, fixed on the glowing stone with what appeared to be satisfaction. What do I do with it? Clara asked the stone, feeling simultaneously weightless and immensely heavy in her palm. Verdun, return it to its resting place. Night Prowler instructed, indicating the stone pedestal. Only one of Comanche blood can do so safely now that it has awakened. With reverent care, Clara placed the spirit stone back on its pedestal. As soon as it left her hand, the overwhelming influx of ancient knowledge receded, leaving only fragments enough to understand, but not enough to be crushed by its weight. The other bandits? She asked, suddenly remembering the threat outside. Fled when they saw their leader fall, Night Prowler assured her, wincing as he pressed a hand to his wounded side. And when Shadow Walker proved difficult to kill. There was a hint of pride in his voice as he glanced at the wolf. Few men have the courage to face a spirit wolf twice. They returned to the main chamber, Night Prowler, leaning on Clara for support, his wound still bleeding, but not as severely as she had feared. Shadow Walker dragged Hargrove's catatonic form behind them, the man's eyes still staring at horrors only he could see. What about the stolen guardians? Clara asked, remembering the original purpose of their journey. Night Prowler nodded toward the cave entrance. Outside, in Hargrove's ritual box. They must be returned to their proper places around the cave. Clara hurried to retrieve the box, while Night Prowler lowered himself painfully to the floor of the main chamber. Shadow Walker stood guard over Hargrove, though the man showed no signs of recovering his senses. As Clara stepped outside into the sunlight, she was startled to see a figure on horseback at the edge of the valley, a tall man wearing the distinctive star of a Texas Ranger. He spotted her at the same moment, raising a hand in cautious greeting. "Mahelo, the cave." The man called, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. "I'm Ranger Samuel Hayes. I'm looking for a man named Hargrove." Clara hesitated, then replied, "He's here, but he's not well." The ranger urged his horse forward, approaching slowly with his hands visible. As he drew closer, Clara could see he was older than she'd expected, with graying hair at his temples and lines etched deeply around his eyes, a man who had seen much in his years wearing the star. "And you would be?" he asked, studying her with sharp, assessing eyes. "Clara Blackburn," she replied, deciding honesty was the best approach. "They killed my parents 3 days ago. Attacked our wagon." Hayes dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. "Been tracking Hargrove for months, grave robbing, artifact theft, even murder when it suits his purposes." His weathered face showed a hint of dry humor. "Found what was left of your family's wagon. Followed the trail here." He glanced toward the cave entrance. "Seems I missed quite a story. There's someone else you should meet," Clara said, gesturing toward the cave. "A Comanche warrior named Night Prowler. He saved my life." Hayes looked skeptical, but followed her into the cave. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm at the sight of the massive wolf, but Clara quickly explained, "Shadow Walker is with us. He won't harm you unless you threaten us." The ranger took in the scene: the wounded Comanche warrior, the catatonic Hargrove, with the wolf standing guard, and the sacred paintings covering the walls. He let out a low whistle of amazement. "Seems like I've missed quite a story," he commented, removing his hat as if entering a church. Night Prowler regarded the lawman warily. "You wear the star," he observed, his voice strained with pain. "Have you come to arrest me for defending sacred land?" Hayes shook his head slowly. "I came for Hargrove. Been building a case against him for months." He looked at the man's vacant stare, an empty expression. "Though it appears something's already delivered a kind of justice, I don't fully understand. He tried to steal something that wasn't meant for him." Clara explained simply. "It showed him the consequences." Hayes looked like he had many questions, but he set them aside for the moment. "You both need medical attention," he said, practically kneeling beside Night Prowler to examine his wound. "This needs proper tending." While the ranger cleaned and bandaged Night Prowler's wound with supplies from his saddlebags, Clara carefully placed the guardian objects in their proper niches around the cave, following Night Prowler's instructions. Each bundle hummed with energy as it was restored to its place, the cave's protection growing stronger with each placement. "What will happen to him?" Clara asked, nodding toward Hargrove as she placed the last guardian. "Law says he'll stand trial for his crimes," Hayes replied, finishing his work on Night Prowler's side. "Though in his condition, it might be an asylum rather than a prison." He sat back on his heels. "As for the rest of his gang, I'll track them down. Justice has a long memory in Texas." Night Prowler looked at Clara, something unspoken passing between them. "The cave is secure again," he said. "But what of you, Clara Blackburn? Where will you go now?" It was the question Clara had been avoiding since the moment her parents died. She had no other family, no home to return to. But something had changed within her, the connection to the Spirit Stone, the revelation about her heritage, the awakening of abilities she was only beginning to understand. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think I'm supposed to learn more about who I am, about what I can do." Night Prowler nodded slowly. "The path of a wolf speaker is not easy," he said. "But it is honorable. If you wish it, I will teach you what I know." Ranger Hayes cleared his throat. "Law says I should find the girl a proper home," he said mildly. "But the law and what's right don't always align perfectly." He studied Clara thoughtfully. "I make regular patrols through Comanche territory. Could check on her welfare from time to time." Clara felt a surge of gratitude toward this unexpected ally. "You do that?" Hayes shrugged, a hint of a smile softening his weathered face. "Seems to me you've earned the right to choose your own path, Miss Blackburn. Not many would have shown the courage you have these past days." He tipped his hat to her. "Besides, I've got a feeling trying to keep you from it would be like trying to hold back the tide with a dinner fork." Before they left the cave, Clara stepped toward the painting of the cave mother. From her pocket, she withdrew the small pouch containing her father's childhood bracelet and the lock of her grandmother's hair. With reverent care, she placed them in a small niche beneath the painting. "He should have stayed," she said softly. "But he chose a different path, and that path led to me." She touched the wall gently. "I won't run from what I am." Night Prowler joined her approval in his eyes. "The circle completes itself," he said. "What was lost returns." They emerged into the afternoon sunlight, Hargrove secured to Hayes's spare horse. The ranger would take him to the nearest town with a jail, while Clara and Night Prowler would travel a different path toward learning and healing. Shadow Walker ranged ahead of them as they left the sacred valley, occasionally looking back as if to ensure they followed. Clara walked beside Night Prowler, supporting him when the terrain grew difficult. "You said my father was being trained as a guardian," she said after they had walked in silence for some time. "Before he was taken." Night Prowler nodded. "He showed great promise. The wolf spirits came to him early, a sign of strong medicine. But then he turned away from it." Clara continued. "He helped Hargrove reveal secrets. And then he tried to undo his mistake." Night Prowler reminded her. "At the cost of his life." Clara absorbed this, trying to reconcile these new complexities with the father she had known and loved. "He was a good man," she said finally, "caught between two worlds, trying to find his way." "As we all are in different ways," Night Prowler agreed. "The path is never clear, even for those with the gift of seeing." They crested a rise overlooking the vast Texas plains. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and amber, the same colors as Shadow Walker's knowing eyes. Somewhere out there, her parents lay buried beneath a humble cairn of stones. Somewhere out there, other sacred places waited vulnerable to those who would desecrate them. "I want to help protect them." She said the words, feeling like a vow. "All of them. Not just Comanche places, but anything sacred that needs protection." Night Prowler nodded approval in his eyes. "Then that will be your path. The path of a guardian." Shadow Walker returned to them, pressing against Clara's side with what felt remarkably like affection. As she rested her hand on the wolf's massive head, Clara felt the weight of her grief begin to shift, not lessening exactly, but transforming into something she could carry. Something that would give her strength rather than break her. One day at a time. She murmured her father's saying, taking on new meaning. One step at a time. Together, the unlikely trio, a girl with newly discovered heritage, a warrior dedicated to ancient traditions, and a wolf that walked between worlds, continued eastward as darkness fell. Behind them, the sacred cave stood protected once more, its guardians restored to their proper places, the spirit stone secure in its chamber deep within the earth. And in the night sky above the full moon rose no longer a harbinger of danger, but a silent witness to new beginnings and ancient continuities, illuminating a path that bridged two worlds, just as Clara herself did. In the months that followed, Clara learned the ways of her newfound heritage under Night Prowler's patient guidance. She learned to listen to the whispers of the wind, to read the subtle signs of animals and spirits passing, to understand the language of wolves. Shadow Walker remained her constant companion, teacher, and protector, a living link to powers older than human memory. Ranger Hayes kept his word, visiting their camp every few weeks with supplies and news. Through him, they learned that Hargrove remained in a state of catatonic shock, confined to an asylum in Austin. His collection of stolen artifacts was seized by the authorities, and Hayes ensured that many were secretly returned to their rightful tribal owners. Word spread among the native peoples of the territory whispered stories of a girl who walked with wolves who could speak to the spirits of sacred places. Some dismissed these tales as myth, but others sought her out bringing knowledge gifts and requests for help protecting their own sacred sites. Clara accepted each new responsibility with the quiet determination that had become her hallmark. The grief for her parents remained a hollow ache that would never entirely heal. But alongside it grew a fierce pride in her mixed heritage, and the unique perspective it gave her the ability to move between worlds to understand both sides of a divided land. On the anniversary of her parents' death, Clara returned to the small cairn of stones she had built over their shallow grave. She was no longer the terrified girl who had buried them with trembling hands. She came now as a young woman, growing into her power shadow walker, padding silently at her side. She placed wildflowers on the grave and stood in silence, remembering. After a time, Night Prowler joined her, his presence a comfort in its steadiness. "They would be proud of who you have become," he said simply. Clara nodded, tears flowing freely, but without the devastating pain of before. Papa always said true strength isn't just about survival. She smiled through her tears. It's about remembering what makes life worth surviving for. They're wise words. Night Prowler acknowledged. What makes your life worth surviving for Clara Blackburn? Clara looked out over the vast Texas landscape, the land of her birth and the land of her ancestors, a land of both terrible cruelty and breathtaking beauty. She thought of the sacred cave, with its ancient paintings of shadow walkers' unfailing loyalty, of night prowlers' patient teaching. She thought of the other sacred places she had helped protect over the past year, and all those that still needed protection. This, she said, simply gesturing to the world around them. All of it. The stories, the spirits, the sacred places, the connections between things that seem separate but aren't. She placed her hand on Shadow Walker's head, feeling the wolf's steady presence. Finding a way to honor both sides of who I am. Night Prowler nodded satisfaction in his eyes. Then you have found the true strength your father spoke of. As they turned to leave, Clara cast one last glance at her parents' grave. I'll make you proud, she whispered. I promise. Shadow Walker howled then, a long haunting sound that echoed across the plains. Not a hunting cry or warning, but a declaration of belonging, of purpose found and promise kept. Night Prowler and Clara joined him, their voices blending with the wolf's in a harmony that transcended words. They were guardians, now protectors of the sacred bonds between peoples and their heritage, between the land and its inhabitants, between the past and the future. In a world determined to forget these connections, they stood as a reminder that some bonds once formed could never truly be broken. And somewhere in the space between worlds, the spirits of the ancestors smiled upon the daughter of two bloodlines who had found her true path, the orphan girl protected by a wolf's snarl, hunted by bandits, her courage forged in the crucible of loss and discovery. Clara Blackburn, wolf speaker guardian of sacred places. A bridge between worlds in a land desperate for healing.